My favorite bet in college football this year is Clemson to win the ACC, plus 140. Like, that's my favorite bet. If you had to take, like, all the Power Fives and you asked me, like, who's my most confident team to win a certain division, it's Clemson, 100%. Chelsea, the way their schedule sets up, and you talked about it, and it's 100% the first thing I look at. Who do you play, and where are those games being played, right? Everybody loves LSU in the SEC this year. I like LSU a lot. You know what LSU's biggest problem is? They have to travel to Tuscaloosa this year and play Bama. Clemson, their schedule, the way it sets up, they get Notre Dame, North Carolina, and Florida State all at home. Their 3 toughest games are all at Death Valley. Like, that's what you want. You want all your toughest games to be at home. So even though Florida State could end up being the better team maybe this year than Clemson, they still have to play Clemson at Clemson. And the winner of that game is going to have the tiebreaker, and it's going to be massive. So that's how it just goes in college football sometimes, Chelsea. Your schedule just aligns perfectly for you. For Clemson, it just so happens that all their toughest games are at home this year. So I love them to win the ACC. I love them to get to the playoff. And then I've said on the network, they're my pick to win the national championship as well because their defense is going to be elite. They have one of the best running backs in the country in Will Shipley. It all comes down to Cade Klubnik, and I'm buying on him being really, really good because they're going to need him to be the 5-star recruit that he was recruited to Clemson to come be. But I think he has a chance to be special. I love the fact that they got the offensive coordinator, Garrett Riley, from TCU. They bring in Lincoln's brother to run the offense because Dabo was kind of falling into the Jim Harbaugh trap where, like, his offenses were a little bit outdated. With DJU, it wasn't as high-powered and free-flowing as we're kind of used to seeing. Now you bring in a guy that's going to be up-tempo, and Clemson's going to air the ball out. They're going to gain a lot of yards, score a lot of points. So I do think we're sleeping on Clemson because, like you said, I mean, there was a stretch there in the mid-2010s where, like, they were the program. And now it's kind of Georgia who's taken over that mantle. People still talk about Bama. They still talk about Ohio State, Michigan, but we still kind of forget about Clemson. And I think Dabo's team's going to remind people that they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, this is why when there was talk of when Clemson was at the height of their success, people were saying that Dabo Swinney was going to be the successor to Nick Saban at Alabama. And I thought to myself, why would you ever leave Clemson? Why would you ever leave the cakewalk of the ACC to go play in the gauntlet of the SEC? I wouldn't do that. So again, you look at the schedule for Clemson and it feels like a cakewalk. Yes, there are games that they could lose in there, but still, like you said, all of their tough ones are at home this season. Maybe that goes against them in the grand scheme of things if there are teams that really put out a good resume from some other conferences, but still, I think the ACC still has like a little glimmer of hope to reach the college football playoff, especially if Clemson runs the table and their path to winning the ACC seems very direct. All of the tough games on their schedule, they get at home, they get Notre Dame at home, they get Florida State at home. So I'm looking at bets over here. And to win the ACC, Clemson is plus 140. I know a lot of people are very high on Florida State, and they are plus 170 to win the ACC, and we'll know about them very quickly out of the gates. Do you think the ACC still runs through Clemson?
I think it does, but I think they've got as good of a chance this year to be knocked off that pedestal as they have had in a very long time. And look, it's Florida State. I will say this. I was at ACC Media Days a few weeks ago, and we really kind of got our hands dirty. I honestly, Chelsea, believe this is going to be the best the ACC has been in years. All right? Now, that does not mean that they're going to be as good as the Southeastern Conference. But I absolutely believe that if Florida State reaches where a lot of us, myself included, believes they are capable of reaching this year, I think the ACC can be every bit as good top to bottom as the Big Ten is. I think Clemson and Florida State are probably just a tick behind Ohio State and Michigan. But I think if you look from 3 back, I think at the end of this year, the ACC will be every bit as deep at 3 to the bottom as the Big Ten is right now. So I don't you're right. the schedule sets up as well as it can, with the big games being at Memorial. There's a couple I'm interested in. Clemson always seems to have wonky stuff happen when they go to Syracuse, and this year they go to Syracuse the week after they played Notre Dame. So that's kind of an interesting game in my opinion. I do think the conference still runs through Clemson, but I think Clemson has been caught up to just a little bit, specifically by Florida State. I think FSU and Clemson are going to be playing a 2-gamer this year. I think they're going to split between Memorial and the ACC Championship in Charlotte, and I am one of those few weirdos that are taking the Noles to pull the upset at plus 170 to win that conference.
For a quick minute, Mookie Betts took over the favorite distinction in the National League over Ronald Acuna Jr. And he had a stretch there where he was tearing the cover off the ball. I think it was like this past weekend, him and Freddie Freeman absolutely went off. If you look at Mookie Betts over his last 7 games, I believe he's hitting close to 600. He's been putting up the stolen bases as well, but I still feel like nobody is going to touch Ronald Acuna Jr. The numbers that he's putting up this season are going to be historical, because we knew the rule changes would give the extra push to guys that could steal bases, because, you know, the pitch clock and bases being bigger. And we've seen that with Ronald Acuna Jr., who now has taken back over that favorite distinction at minus 150. Do you think there is a race here, or do you think it is squarely Ronald Acuna Jr. that is going to be the MVP in the National League?
I think there's a race, and it's incredible that Mookie's honestly got it to this point, because what Acuna has done for really the entire year, the average, the power, the stolen bases, like what he's done, obviously being the catalyst for this historic Braves offense that we're seeing, you just really thought it would be tough for somebody to catch him. And what's funny, Chelsa, is we all thought, like, if somebody were, it would be the other Dodger, right? Like, we thought it'd be Freddie Freeman for the longest time, and now Mookie's just on another level. I think the case you can make for Mookie, too, obviously the stats are one thing. He's had to transition from being an outfielder to a second baseman. Like, how many people can you remember doing that? You know what I mean? I mean, like, being an outfielder to an infielder, especially second base, where you have to turn double plays, you have to move all over with kind of the mini shifts now. Obviously, you're not allowed to move as much as you once were. But making that adjustment, like, people I think on the outside maybe think second base is the easiest position because it's a short throw to first base. I can promise you second base is not easy, especially when you have to transition from being an outfielder. So I think that is really being overlooked in all this, especially when we talk about somebody who is so valuable, and the way that Dave Roberts has been able to plug him in at second so he can play other guys into the outfield. I think that isn't being talked about enough. I think that's where Mookie's real value is, aside from the average, aside from the home runs and all that, and obviously the RBIs, what he's done from the leadoff spot, what both of these guys have done. I think that's really where maybe the case for Mookie is defensively, how much of a value he has been to the Dodgers. I still think Acuna's the MVP at this point, but Chelsa, I think with the month to go, this is going to be one of those races where, you know, you talk to me on Thursday and Mookie might be the favorite. You talk to me on Saturday, Acuna might be the favorite again. And what makes this fun is these two teams play this weekend, upcoming, right? We get the Dodgers home against the Braves.
Take your pick. Which one of these guys is going to have the best year? Anthony Richardson of the Colts, Bryce Young of the Panthers, C.J. Stroud there in Houston.
I think all three are going to struggle, Bill. I really do. But if I had to pick, I would take Bryce Young. C.J. Stroud, the Texans are a work in progress. He's got a nice young running back in Dameon Pierce, but just doesn't have enough at receiver. We know the Texans are rebuilding, so I throw him off the board. Anthony Richardson, I think we all agree, like, of these three guys, if there was one who might benefit from sitting a year, it would be him. But Jim Irsay obviously took him early. He wants to see him play. He wants to see how that relationship with Shane Steichen's going to work. So I think they're just kind of rushing him into this. Bryce Young, that Panthers offensive line might be the worst in the NFL. Like, it's awful. Bryce is going to get hit a ton. Receiving-wise, they lost DJ Moore, obviously. They bring in, like, Adam Thielen, and they have Terrace Marshall there. he really doesn't have enough weapons. So all three of these guys, I think, are kind of in situations that you worry about. I think Young's the most talented, though. I think he's the most NFL ready. I think he's going to be the best of the bunch. So I don't love any of them, but if I had to pick, I would take Bryce Young.
You have to pick. That's the name of the show. Take your pick.
So I'm going to do that and take Bryce Young.
I kind of echo the sentiment that PJ is bringing to the table, and the fact that I think all three of these guys are really going to struggle. But let's take a little risk here. Let's go with Anthony Richardson, because we've seen Bryce Young, and I feel like of these three guys, doesn't he feel like the most consistent or like trustworthy pick? The guy with maybe the lowest floor, but he has not looked good in the preseason. I think it's a testament to how bad the Panthers are on the offensive line. They don't have a lot of talent around him. And I feel like we will see the most highlights from Anthony Richardson. So a lot of this question has to do on what do you think best means, quote unquote best. So I'm going to go with Anthony Richardson here. Maybe he makes a lot of mistakes, but I think he's going to give us a ton of highlights from this season. And when they're good, they're going to be amazing. But when he's bad, he's probably going to be real bad. And taunting the other fans, what are we doing, Anthony Richardson? Whatever he's doing, I'm grabbing my popcorn and I want to watch.